Welcome, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting of the Tautog Management Board to order. My name is Mike Luisi. I am the administrative proxy for the state of Maryland, and I'm your current chair, so I'll be chairing the meeting today. With me to my left, I have the technical committee chair, Craig Whedon, also from Maryland, and joining me to my right is James Boyle, who is our FMP coordinator, as well as Dr. Drew, who will be providing information to us today. With that, let's go ahead to our first item on the agenda, which is the approval of the agenda. Does any member of the board have any modifications they'd like to see made to the agenda? Are there any objections to the approval of the agenda? Seeing none, consider the agenda approved. Our next item on today's agenda is the approval of proceedings from the January 25th, 2022 meeting. It seems like an awful long time ago, and I guess it is. It's been a while since this board's been together. Are there any additions, edits, anything to report regarding the proceedings? Okay, seeing none, are there any objections to approving the proceedings? Seeing none, let's consider the proceedings approved. The next item on our agenda is public comment. This board will entertain public comment on items that are not on today's agenda from any member of the public. I don't see any in the crowd tour. I'll come to you during the tagging discussion that we plan to have in just a bit. This would be for items that are not on the agenda. Do we have anyone online? Okay, no one's online. So we'll go ahead and move past public comment to our first item on today's agenda. For presentation purposes, we're here to consider approval of fishery management plan review and state compliance for the 2022 fishing year. And I'm going to turn that over to James for the FMP review presentation. So take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. I'll be presenting the Tautog FMP review for 2022 fishing year. Next slide, please. So on the screen is an overview of the sections of the report that I'll be reviewing briefly. So there's the status of the FMP, status of the stock, status of the fishery, before getting into the compliance requirements like the biological sampling requirements and an update on the commercial tagging program. So Tautog has been managed under Amendment 1 since its approval in 2017, which established the commercial tagging program and delineated the stock into 4 regions, each with individual spawning stock biomass and mortality targets. The only reported regulatory change for 2022 was in Rhode Island, which implemented a maximum size to their recreational regulations such that only 1 fish of the bag limit may be above 21 inches. Their possession limits and minimum size remain unchanged, and the document notes that Massachusetts has implemented a complementary change for 2023. The status of the stock has not changed since the previous review for fishing year 2021. It's based on the 2021 stock assessment update, which found improvements in most regions from the 2017 assessment. Overfishing was no longer occurring in any region as of 2020, while only the New Jersey, New York Bight region remained overfished, although the spawning stock biomass did trend upward in that region between those 2 assessments. For historical context, since 1981, total coastwide harvest peaked at 22.5 million pounds in 1986. Since then, harvest has declined significantly, starting even before state restrictions were implemented. Total harvest has averaged approximately 7.8 million pounds per year since 1996, when the FMP was first approved. In 2022, non-confidential commercial landings amounted to approximately 541,950 pounds, which is about a 28% increase from 2021 and accounted for approximately 6% of the total coastwide harvest. On a state level, New York had the most commercial landings of Tautog in 2022 with 73% of the coastwide total, and Massachusetts landed the second most with approximately 13% of the coastwide total. Additionally, Massachusetts and Rhode Island's commercial landings both exceeded their state quotas by 15% and 1% respectively, and the states have adjusted their 2023 quotas to account for these overages. Tautog is predominantly taken by the recreational fishery, about 96% on average by weight. Coastwide, anglers harvested historic highs of over 20 million pounds of tautog in 1986 and 1992. Since then, harvest has declined, fluctuating between 3.4 million pounds and 13.2 million pounds, which was in 2021. 2022 harvest is estimated at 8.8 million pounds, which was an approximate 33% decrease from that high in 2021. For biological sampling, the only note was that Virginia was unable to meet the 200 age sample requirement in 2022 due to the dispersed and inconsistent nature of the fishery in the state. Virginia was able to collect 181 samples. In light of this small difference, the PRT recommends the board find all states in compliance with the sampling requirements of the FMP. For de minimis status, Maryland and Delaware both continue to request de minimis status and meet the criteria based on their commercial landings, and the PRT is recommending approval of their requests. For the commercial tagging program, 2022 was the second year where every state participated, and state-by-state tagging information is summarized more thoroughly in the document. Overall, coastwide, the percentage of issued tags that were returned varied between 17% and 66%, and the coastwide return rate was 31%. The PRT noted that preliminary estimates show there were just under 13,000 tags unaccounted for coastwide, which is about 5.1% of tags issued. These are primarily in Rhode Island and New York, and although it is a 30% decrease from 2021 unaccounted for tags, which was a little over 18,000. So while there is a notable improvement, the PRT is still recommending that states work to reduce the number of tags unaccounted for, and more information on the tagging program will follow in upcoming presentations from the technical committee and law enforcement committees. So with that, the board action for consideration today is to approve the 2022 tautog FMP review and the de minimis requests for Delaware and Maryland. And with that, I will accept any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, James. Any questions? Emerson Hasbrook.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have any questions, but when you're ready for a motion to accept the review, I'll make that motion.
Okay, let me see if anyone has any questions first. Seeing no hands, I think staff have prepared a motion. We can get that up and then I'll come to you, Emerson.
Move to approve the fishery management plan, review state compliance reports and de minimis requests for Delaware and Maryland for the 2022 fishing year.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion, second by John Clark. Discussion on the motion? Is there any discussion? Is there any objection to the motion? Seeing none, the motion carries by consent. Thank you very much, James, for the presentation. So we're going to go ahead and move on to the next item on the agenda. It's the item to consider committee reports on the commercial tagging program and possible changes to the tagging program. There is possible action being considered here today. And I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to our technical committee chair, Mr. Craig Whedon, for that presentation. So Craig, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the board. I only have 7 slides. Everything I'm going to cover is in the supplemental and in your handouts as well. Next slide, please. So the TC met 3 times in April, May, and July to discuss the reported live market fish quality and mortality issues presumed associated with the commercial tagging requirements. In April, we developed survey questions to standardize and distribute to the fishery participants. We wanted to drill down and focus on the market, specifically with damage and mortality, and not discuss applicator issues and other things that were corrected by previous states, other states in the learning curve over a year. Next slide, please. We also discussed the best practice recommendation for tagging tautog in the left operculum, which was included in the technical guidance document, but not mandated in the FMP. Furthermore, the TC noted that a previous study conducted by New York used a smaller version of the current tag. It was the -4 versus the 681 tag. It's a strap tag, but it was a little bit smaller. And the board went ahead and used the larger tag because to accommodate for all the serial numbers and accountability, the state, the year, and everything else that needed to go on that. So the survey results, next slide, please. We condensed these. We have breakouts in your handouts and backup slides for each state. But this is a regional summary. So of the 176 harvesters, and there were dealers that responded, 52% used live storage, 44% reported lesions and excess damage due to the tags, and 43% reported fish mortality associated with the tags in the live market. The most concerning problems were associated with the live market in New York, but other states had similar issues with the tags as well, just not at a very big scope. Next slide, please. I'm going to talk about the New York tag study that they were given the go-ahead from the policy board, and we had really high hopes for the cinch tag that they put on the tail. So they had 10 fish they held for 2 weeks, and they put the cinch tag around the tail on all the fish. These fish also had the standard operculum tags in them, and they also applied that tag and the smaller version of the tag to fins and the tail. And after 15 days, they realized that there was damage to the fish. So they stopped the study. It was going to go on for 30 days and do some live market testing. So they reported that to us. And the next slide shows the results of the study. So basically the damage was equal to the current tagging system, basically. So it was kind of not successful, and it was upsetting. Next slide, please. So we had some really productive meetings and covered some old ground and rediscussed some situations from the market and from the tagging program and possibilities of using different tags for live market fish versus the unalive market fish, trade-offs between the security of the tag design and trying to come up with a more workable tag. We also, the merits of the program were discussed, and it was noted that the New York landings in the commercial sector went up quite a bit from 21 to 22. Originally I thought it was 20%, but it was higher than that. I think it was around 40%. So that was good. We think that was probably from better reporting. And we did reach a consensus that the tagging program should remain in place and various new studies to focus on changing the tagging location, tag size, or tag type may provide relief to harvesters. Next slide, please. And our recommendations. After discussing the potential methods to reduce the unique characters needed on each tag, the TC is recommending to the board to consider tasking the TC with evaluating the feasibility of converting to the smaller tag. If feasible, New York plans to conduct a study with industry to evaluate the effectiveness of the tag in the current commercial holding tanks and possibly present this at the annual meeting. Other states are encouraged to replicate this research. An alternative tag type such as the T-bar tag may provide a compromise with easy application and minimal impact to the marketability of the fish, but these will be offset with less security and a higher cost. And that concludes my brief.
Okay, thanks, Craig. Let me see if any members of the board have any questions for Craig. John Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentation, Craig. Just curious as to, with the tags, were all the fishermen using the actual applicator that the National Tag Company supplies, or were some of them using pliers instead, and did that make any difference?
I'm not positive. I think they use the proper applicator, because if you don't, you have a lot of issues with tags misfiring or bending. They're $25. I think most people have them by now, or they should, because the tags don't really work well without the proper applicator.
All right, thanks, John. Thanks, Craig. Dan McKiernan.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. To John's point, I think the problem is that the applicator doesn't hold up to salt water so well, and that could be part of the challenge. But I wonder in the long term if when we made the decision to go to the bigger tag because we needed more information on the tag, I wonder if we could go back to how much information needs to be on the tag. And I know Tony was instrumental in helping us figure that one out as we were ordering those tags. Massachusetts buys the tags and we hand them out for free. So I'm not really interested in getting more expensive tag. And what's different about these tags or the management of this program is my state, like other states that don't have an IFQ, we need a lot of tags as instead of giving everybody their amount of tags totally commensurate with their allocation. When you have a kind of an not an open access fishery, but a fishery where any individual fisherman can exceed last year's catch, everybody needs surplus tags, and so we do our best to get them back. But getting back to my recommendation, I wonder if we could do a combination of alphanumeric characters and to get back to that smaller tag, because that smaller tag seemed to be superior. So in other words, instead of MA, maybe we could go with, just one letter, or because when you use letters, as we know with RMV license plates, letters help you get a whole lot of extra options.
Tony Kearns.
Mike, we can definitely, thank you, and Dan, we can definitely do that. Another thing that James and I have been talking about is the actual number of tags being ordered is becoming significantly less, I believe. Whether or not it's few enough for every state to switch over or need to switch over to a letter to represent their state or not, I'm not sure, but several states are not ordering as many tags as we originally thought they would need.
Jason McNamara.
Thanks, Craig. Good job getting through that quickly and efficiently. So first, just like this discussion was interesting. I wonder if there's even a simpler way to code it where each state gets the first number is the state. So we just assign 1 to Rhode Island and 2 to Connecticut, and then whatever other numbers you need. So I'm just thinking out loud, but the idea of revisiting how to make the tags, keep the accountability, but make them simpler, I think is a good way to go. And then the other way, I thought you could probably shrink the tag. I wonder if there's any chip tags that exist where it's just a little, and they're probably more expensive than these metal ones, but maybe not by a lot. All of our key cards for the hotel all have little chips in them. They're not super expensive, and that might be, we'd have to give all of our enforcement officers little wands or something to read them, but they'll just add more stuff onto their utility belt. And just throwing ideas out there for the TC to kind of investigate and think on.
I did bring the tags with me, and the year and the state are in much smaller size than the actual number. We might be able to just go with smaller numbers. And then we did talk about the letters, because there's 26 combinations with a letter versus 10 with a number. And I believe we only have to shave off maybe 1 numeral. But we discussed this with the TC, and the accountability of having tags with multiple letters is painful. And some states have more tags than others. So I think that New York wanted to have the capacity for 200,000 tags, so it's a lot.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go to Tony. Eric Reed, I know your hand's up online, and then I'll go to John Clark after that. So go ahead, Tony.
Just a reminder to the board as we try to think of new ideas that the tag has to be non-tamperable. So that aspect of it, it can't be reused easily.
Yeah, that's a good point, Tony. And I think in a minute, I'm going to go to the public where I received a demonstration right prior to the meeting regarding the reusableness, that's a word, of the tag that we currently use. So stay tuned for that, but also be thinking about how you would like to task the TC in moving forward with this, given the recommendation from the TC to provide a tasking job for them between now and our next meeting. Dan, I want to come back to you in a sec. Let me go to Eric Reed and then John, and then I'll come over to you, Dan. Eric Reed.
Okay, thank you. How about now?
There you go. We hear you.
Okay, thanks a lot. I appreciate the presentation. On your slide, you don't have to pull it up, about testing the two different size tags. Did I hear you right? And you said there was not much difference between the size of the tags and the outcome. Was that right?
Craig.
Well, the hope was that the cinch tag on the tail was going to be successful. But previously in 2016, New York did a study with Stony Brook using a smaller tag in pretty good conditions, and they were successful without much or any fish damage. And then the test that they did recently was in a little bit harsher conditions, and they had damage from all the tags.
Yeah, okay, thanks. That's what I thought I heard you say, which honestly leads me to believe that maybe it's the tank that's causing the damage. If they're using mesh rectangular tanks, the mesh is reasonably rough, let's say, and fish tend to swim into the corner and they get stuck in the corner, as foolish as that may sound. But a round tank with smooth, hard sides might solve the problem. The fish will swim around in circles. They won't get hung up on the mesh. So, I mean, it's just a thought, but maybe it's not the tag, maybe it's the tanks.
All right, thanks, Eric. John Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to, if you follow up some on the T-bar tags, Craig, because I mean, T-bars are real simple to use. I was surprised to hear that they cost more because they're usually fairly inexpensive and they're very easy to teach people how to apply them. Do they have good retention rate in the TOG? And if so, I mean, you can get a lot of information on the standard T-bar too. So just curious.
Well, they've been used for a long time. New York was ready. They told me they were ready to go with that, but they weren't supposed to use that based off law enforcement guidance because it's too easy to pull them out of the fish and put them in another fish. They didn't think it was secure enough. I think the applicator short term, the cost is like $50. And I think it does cost a little bit more than the band tag. And then the control is a little less because we have one company, I mean, that manufactures these. But I think it's, if we're looking at getting rid of the tagging program, I think it's a good idea because originally, supposedly recreational fishermen were selling their fish. And I don't think someone would go through that much effort to get their own counterfeit tags and all that, but they may, I don't know.
Right. And with T-bars, I mean, the gun, once you pay for the $50, they're plastic, so they don't have any problem. You can replace the needles. So it's real simple that way. And the tags themselves, usually if you pull those out of a fish, you're usually going to bend the T-bar part enough so that it's not going to work that well on another fish.
Dan McKiernan.
Yeah, Craig, how many characters need to go on the tag? Did you guys look at that? Is it 6?
Right now, we have the state and the year in small letters taking up one section, one column. Then we have a letter and 4 numbers. And I believe we have to get rid of just one number, hopefully. Might be 2. I think it's just 1.
So we issue, or we order like 30,000 tags. So getting back to Jason's point, if the state could be a 1 character designation and the year could be a 1 character designation, and we need 30, 30,000. So I need 5 characters sequential or 5 numbers sequential. Then there's 7. And then maybe New York, if they need that extra character, could just have a different state, a second state designation, so they can get a second set. Would that help? Because I kind of feel bad. I know it was a successful trial with that smaller tag, and then at the 11th hour, we said, "Oh shoot, we need a bigger tag for more information." But maybe there's a creative way to reduce the amount of information.
Right, yes, sir. The band company will put the prefix, the state, and the year on the opposite side as well. So maybe you could have the numbers on the inside of the mouth. I know that there was some concern from New York that the law enforcement want to be able to read the state and the year when they're in the tank. But yeah, there's some possibilities. I think they want to go ahead and test the smaller tag first before we really get in the weeds with it.
Okay, any other questions for Craig? My last experience with a T-bar tag and that very easily used applicator, it was probably 15 years ago. I was standing there in front of the governor of Maryland with his son watching me tag a flounder to throw back over in the coastal bays. I pushed so hard on the flounder, I put the gun into the cooler that I was tagging on. Blood was going everywhere. It was a total disaster and like media event. So I'm sorry I kind of tuned that whole part of that discussion out. I have some reoccurring nightmares of that one from a long time ago. Okay, before we get to taking some action and providing guidance to the technical committee, and given some of the questions that have come up, I'm going to go to the public. Tor Vincent it is, right? Yeah, if you want to step up to any of the microphones here and recognize, please introduce yourself. And we do have a little bit of time on the agenda here today, but if I could ask you to provide your comment regarding the tagging program, provide your comments to me directly and not to any individual on the board, and to keep your comments to just a few minutes. We do appreciate you coming down. So thank you. You can start whenever.
Thanks, Mike. I showed you before that the tag you've been using has an external locking mechanism, which is easily straightened out and reused. It can go about 5 times generally before it breaks. That means your tags are good for 5 uses, which you've been doing. They were not nearly the tags, the design is not nearly the tags that you originally tested, but the vendor sold you these tags. And what I see what happened here is you got lost in this, we need our digits and whatever, and you forgot you were not supposed to harm the fish, and you were supposed to have a secure tag. You blew it on both of those. Neither of those are even close to being qualified. So what I also want to bring up is when you talk about tanks, you talk about harsh conditions, whatever, the New York test was done in well water. Well water is basically sanitized water that's been sanitized of the pathogens, and it's flowing through the system and being dumped. It's a hospital setting. It's the absolute cleanest thing you can create in a tank. That is not valid for testing. A closed system is based on bacteria being in the system. It's a petri dish of bacteria. That's how it works. That's what takes care of the nitrates and everything in the system. Everybody knows this. You cannot tell me good conditions and bad conditions. You have to use a closed system that has all the bacteria. And we know from the history of holding fish, you cannot put a damaged fish in there. It will get infected. This is also known in the aquarium world. When you talk about tanks, you cannot have a sharp edge in a tank. It'll cut the fish. The first scratch in the fish is most likely where it becomes infected and dies. This is known. This is known science. You've created this illusion that you didn't know this. When you harm that fish and we bring a perfect fish. We cannot sell a damaged fish to the live market. We bring a perfect fish and we mutilate it with this tag and watch these infections happen. That's on you. You absolutely should have known better. And for you to say good tanks, bad tanks is silly. Absolutely silly. You're responsible for what you've done here. And as you get into your security issues, you have to harm the fish. Or when you security issues, I don't even understand this bit about a T-tag because I've used them. They come in a rack that fits in the gun. How are you going to reuse a single tag? You can't put it in the gun by itself. You're going to take a piece of pliers and stick it in? I don't know. I mean, but you already have a tag that's been able to be reused 5 times. And if you haven't found any, if you've had any conservation effects, I don't know that you have. I don't agree that there was a reason for this in the same way. I don't think there's enough talent around to fill all the tags that are out there, quite honestly, in New York. I don't know the states where you don't have the amount of tags, that's probably more likely where they're being reused. What happened in New York was you created this thing where, oh, if you don't have a history, and New York went out there and just handed out the tags with no financial, you didn't have to show any proof of commerce. You just said, I caught this many fish. There's people throwing those tags in a dumpster everywhere. When you say New York landings are up, I don't believe that's legitimate. I really don't. Okay, my landings used to be something like 3 or 4% of New York landings. Now they're down to like 1.5%, 2%. The fishing hasn't changed. Those guys aren't out there. I don't see them. All right, so I don't, a lot of the stuff you got so lost here, but the biggest thing is you need to understand what a tank is, what a commercial holding facility tank is, and all the bacteria that are involved. Because if you don't, you're going to continue to fail and you are going to continue to cause economic harm like you already have. You are definitely responsible for the economic harm you've caused. And I want to see what you do about it. I hope we don't need a legislative fix to come and look at how wrong you've got this and got away with it. Because you have to figure out how you're going to take care of that damage. That should absolutely be a priority. Okay?
Yeah, thank you very much for your comment. Appreciate that. Okay, before I turn to the law enforcement presentation, does anyone have any other questions for Craig? Yeah, Roy Miller?
Mike, I seem to recall a study some time ago using the T-bar tags. I have a vague recollection of Tautog were inclined to pluck them off other Tautog in the tank. Does that ring any bells? Am I right in my recollection of that?
Again, you're bringing up the T-bar tag, Roy. No, it doesn't. My memory's not as good as it once was. I don't remember that discussion. Maybe somebody else around the table may, but I don't personally. All right. Jason?
Yeah, I don't remember it super well, but I'm pretty sure the T-bar tag was one of the tags that was tested in the original work that was done, where we ended up with this kind of cow ear tag in the end. Tony's saying no, but
It might have been one of the tags that we looked at, but the only tag that we ended up water testing, I believe, was the small tag. I think we put a bunch of tags out. Law enforcement committees said that the small tag was the least tamperable. And I think we can I think Kurt is giving the report. Let's let Kurt discuss the non-tamperableness of the T-bar tag, and then you guys can evaluate whether or not you want New York to go ahead and test that or not, based on what Kurt tells you guys about that T-bar tag. But I don't think we actually water tested it.
yeah, that could be right. I just was suggesting that we looked at all of your kind of standard tagging approaches and
Okay, thanks. You don't play poker, do you, Tony? Good. as soon as you say something, you can see it all over Tony's face if you're right or wrong as you're speaking. Dan McKiernan, we'll go to you last, and then I'm going to turn to Kurt.
So I look forward to Kurt's report because we were assured by law enforcement then that when the tag was removed, it became somewhat mangled, and it was kind of a dead giveaway that such a tag would have been reused because of the distortion of the metal. So I look forward to hearing from law enforcement on that issue.
Okay, with that, that's a good segue into the Law Enforcement Committee report. And Kurt, if you can hold on, I've got one more hand waving in the air. Chris Wright.
My experience of tagging fish in a research setting and working in a wet lab, anything you put through the flesh, you're going to have an infection, even if you have a clean system like our comment had. And if you're going to be holding those fish for any period of time, there's going to be an infection and it's going to get damaged for market purposes. Is there any other tag that you evaluated that goes to the mouth and then through the gill, or like a zip tie type of application where once it's zipped, it can't be taken out unless it's cut? That would be the only thing that I can think of that wouldn't damage the fish in some way and would still keep them marketable. Was there any evaluation of that type of a tag?
Well, so I think I can maybe answer this. Not that I'm aware of through the mouth and the gill, but the tag that Craig presented on that after 15 days showed some wear and tear was a zip tie type of tag placed around the tail. And I think what ended up happening is it probably just wore away the protective barrier on the fish, and then in a confined setting, it became infected. But that's the only one I'm aware of. Craig, was there any other work done on anything through the mouth into the gills?
Like our striped bass tags for on the live market? No, not that I'm aware of.
Okay, let's turn to Kurt Blanchard, who's going to provide us a Law Enforcement Committee report. Kurt, are you with us?
I am. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you guys hear me all right?
Yeah, we can hear you just fine. Floor is yours.
Perfect. The LEC conducted a virtual meeting on July 19th, 2023 to discuss the current status of the tag tagging program. Next slide, please. We were briefed by staff on both the state harvester survey that TC completed, as well as the New York assessment. Next slide, please. In an effort to update the January 2022 LEC report to the Tag Management Board, staff proposed the following questions to the LEC for consideration. The first is the program working to reduce illegal harvest? And is there a quantitative or qualitative way to evaluate? The consensus was that the tag tagging requirement is effective in reducing illegal sale of unreported fish. The rationale for the opinion is that officers are seeing fewer fish and violations in the live market, which is attributed to the reduction in illicit sale of recreationally caught fish. The tagging program has closed a path for illegal distribution and provided a means of accountability with dealers and fishermen. Officers still pursue and document the illegal so-called backdoor sales of fish, but the main path for distribution has been reduced. The group also discussed the possibility that increased penalties, as implemented in New Jersey, and/or a potential decrease in consumer demand are possible explanations for reduction in fish and violations. These findings are subjective in nature, and most states do not collect species-specific data. The inability to have consistent data points across all jurisdictions creates a false narrative in our deliberations. Many states can provide the number of citations and/or warnings issued for documented violations, but not all states can show the number of inspections or license checks, either commercially or recreationally, specific to a species. Question number 2, what are the areas of concern for compliance? And are these outweighing the benefit of the program? The main concern for compliance was the specific time of tagging of fish. The issue is not new to the tagging requirement and was considered at the time of implementation of this program. Most regulations have identified that commercially caught fish must be tagged at the time of offload. This was in consideration of having a fisherman required to tag a fish at the time of take, while in the middle of handling gear and or navigating weather conditions. This becomes problematic when an inspection is being conducted at sea or near shore, and the fish are not required to be tagged. Rhode Island recently changed their law to fish needing to be tagged at the time of landing. There was some discussion about shore-based fishery where either offload nor landing apply, and how time of possession should be considered. There was an additional comment that dealer tagging versus fisher tagging should be considered. The striped bass fishery was used as an example. The consensus was that any compliance concerns did not outweigh the benefit of this program. And the third and final question was, are the tag issues causing non-compliance? The LEC does not think that tag issues are causing non-compliance. A small amount of non-compliance that has been observed is based on fishermen not respecting the rule. In both New York and New Jersey, officers witnessed untagged fish at dealers with matching tags adjacent to respective fish, but not on the fish. An additional violation was documented by Rhode Island of a dealer who was in possession of untagged fish. The belief was that this was a 3-day limit of fish sold at one time. With the lack of tags, officers had difficulty in tracing the fish back to the fisherman. There was also one comment made that officers are not seeing the level of damage to fish that are being reported by the industry. That was one comment. Mr. Chairman, that's all I have for this summary. There was a couple of points brought up about the tag and consideration of what law enforcement feels on what we need. The 2 points that we wanted to make or have made in the past on the tags are they need to be tamper-proof and we need to have traceability. I was not involved in the original assessments of the different tags, respective tags. I do know that the small tag that has been referenced, I believe by Tony and others, was the one we were recommending and willing to support. As far as the T-bar tag, I don't have information on that. I do know it has been alleged that they are tamper-proof and they don't hold up to this type of fishery. I would suggest that if that is a tag that is being considered, that maybe we do test it and water test it and get some better information on that before we would comment. That's all I have at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Kurt. And I will say that given the presentation I got and the from Tor before the meeting started, those tags that we're currently using, he was able to demonstrate the bendability of the tip of the tag, and I don't see any reason why it couldn't be used, more than once. It didn't even require a lot of bending, or it was just a simple twist of the wrist with a wrench. All right, so I'm going to come back for board consideration of tasking the TC with moving forward with some direction given. I'll start with Dan on this.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I'd like to just make an observation that it was really our last minute decision to expand, go to the next larger tag. That was kind of a wild card in this situation. And it was demonstrated to me 4 or 5 years ago when we first started this, that the tag that was tested, the smaller tag, when you do cinch it on the fish, to get it off that fish, you really have to do some pretty serious bending of the tag. So I'm not convinced that if we couldn't come up with a more creative sequential marking system with the year and et cetera, that going back to what was originally tested wouldn't bring about the solution that we need. As far as whether a live Tautog can be kept for long periods of time in closed system, I concede to that. But on the other hand, 95% of the landings of Tautog are recreational, and we had a serious poaching problem. Mm-hmm. And in my mind, if the commercial fishery can't figure this out, then I don't know. I don't know what we do, but I would love to see us go back to that original tag and try to work with that which was developed and see if that wasn't the answer. Maybe we veered off by going to that next larger tag.
Okay, thanks, Dan. Any other thoughts? Chris?
One of the things I did for my master's degree was marking juvenile Atlantic salmon. One of the tagging things, which wasn't a tag, I freeze branded the juveniles and I kept them live in a box or whatever. Did you ever consider freeze branding? And you can do, we used basically typewriter key type of things in liquid nitrogen that would freeze them, would keep them alive. I didn't have any mortalities from that. And it doesn't damage the fish. It just leaves it like a tattoo type of mark. That's also a possibility. There has to be something there that helps out the fishermen and they don't lose their market, but doesn't damage the fish, but we can still enforce it. So that's the conundrum, but that might be another option.
All right, thanks for those thoughts. Anyone else? John?
Just a practical question. If we do go back to the smaller tag, we'd have to get new applicators, right? The applicator for the bigger tag, does it work with the smaller tag?
You need a different applicator. Dan?
But that's a cheaper app. It's a cheaper tag. It's a cheaper applicator. You could buy 2 or 3 of them. So you're right though, but it's I don't know, $25.
So what do you?
So
Do you need
small expense.
I don't need a motion. Yeah, so let me go to Jesse. And then I'm going to ask the question to the board as to whether or not there's been you're supportive of the direction mentioned at least a few times now today about continued follow-up work by the technical committee. Go ahead, Jesse.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm ready to make that motion whenever you're ready.
It's all you.
All right. So I will move to task the technical committee with evaluating the feasibility of the smaller tag and any other tag that has not been previously tested, which may meet the goals and objectives of the Tautog tagging program.
Okay, I have a motion. Let me get it on the board first, Jesse, and then I'll ask for a second. John, you're going to second that? Okay. While they're working to get that on board, any discussion on that motion? Jason?
Yeah, I mean, I think a good starting point, and maybe the technical committee has done this recently, but to go back to that, like we put a report together with the original kind of testing of the tag. So I think starting there and then kind of working their way to a potential new solution, I think is a good, I think it aligns with what Jesse just offered as well, but just to offer a little more guidance.
All right, thanks for that. Dan McKiernan.
I don't want to make it too open-ended. I'd like to get the report back from the technical committee about the smaller tag without them going off into new directions. So can we get a report on that first tag, and then what if they think they need to pursue second, third, and fourth tags? Maybe that could be a second exercise.
That seems reasonable to me. I think, Craig, you mentioned that there'd be a follow-up at the annual meeting.
Right. Yes, Mr. Chair. The timeline's pretty tight in order to implement a new tag by the next fishing season. So they were looking at October, coming back with the smaller band tag. And is the T-bar tag authorized in this motion, or I don't know if it's been tested before or not. I know that there's been a lot of success with that tag in research, so. It does.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Okay. So I think, Dan, I think what we can do is we can task the technical committee with coming back to us, even though it's a quick turnaround, coming back to us with what they can find between now and then. And then if we feel satisfied with the work that they've done, we can start working towards implementing any new type of tag that is being considered, or test them further if what we see we don't like the results of the work. Okay. All right, so we have a motion before us. I want to make sure, I'm so used to turning around here. Let's see. Does anyone need any time to caucus on the motion before I call the question? I don't see any other hands being raised. Jason?
Okay, just 30 seconds. I just have to bring up Eric here.
All right, 30-second caucus.
I just have a quick question for the board members, especially those of you that have earlier fisheries than others. When do your fishermen order the tags? Because I know it's soon-ish, but I don't know when that is. Are the Bay States the earliest?
I think November was probably the latest. October, November was,
Okay.
yeah.
I'm just want to make sure we're thinking about that in terms of next year. I mean, luckily in this case, the annual meeting is earlier, but I just want to.
It would be a heavy lift though for everyone to get a new applicator.
That sounds about when we ordered them too, Tony, was around that time. And they were really fast, but we don't order many. I mean, we're a few hundred is all we ordered.
They probably dropped that order all free to you on the way down to Maryland.
I wish.
Shannon Madsen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, we actually order our tags pretty soon. So October might be rough for us unless we're definitely switching over in October to the new tags, because we let people pick them up by December 1st. So we actually usually order our tags sometime in about September. So we can stretch it. I think they could probably turn it around quickly if that's the route that we intend on taking. It's also not a problem for Virginia. Frankly, we don't have a live market. We have maybe one guy who used to live tag Tautog, but he hasn't done it in a long time. So if worse comes to worse and we're stuck using the old tags, it's really not a problem for Virginia.
Okay. Yeah, I think those hurdles will be things that we'll just have to deal with as states. But I think the information that we can gather from the work, from the technical committee work, will be important in deciding how we improve this program moving forward. So I'll leave it with that. Okay, seeing no other hands, I'm going to go ahead and read the motion into the record, and then I'll call the question. The motion is move to task the technical committee with evaluating the feasibility of using the smaller tag and any tag that has not been previously tested that may meet the goals and objectives of the tagging program. Motion made by Mr. Hornstein, seconded by Mr. Clark. Is there any objection to the motion? Seeing no objection, the motion carries by consent. Thank you very much. And Craig and Kirk, thanks for the information. We'll look forward to your report in October. Okay, moving on. I'm going to go ahead to the next item on the agenda this afternoon. It's a progress update on the 2025 Tautog stock assessment. And we've got Dr. Katie Drew going to give us some information about that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the last stock assessment, as we covered in the FMP review, was conducted in 2021 with a terminal year of 2020. We recommended that the next update be in 2024, which would, because we use a 3-year average to calculate F, and that would get us 3 years past the last point. However, 2024 is an extremely heavy year for the commission in terms of stock assessments. So we talked with the Tautog Technical Committee, and they agreed that shifting the assessment back 1 year to be completed in 2025 instead of 2024 would make the most sense in terms of balancing everyone's workload without having serious repercussions. Given the status of the stock was generally favorable during the last assessment update. So that's the current plan, is to conduct a stock assessment update in 2025 with a terminal year of 2024. In addition, the technical committee recommended putting a benchmark on the schedule for Tautog. It's been a while since we've done a benchmark for this species. We have several new surveys that will have enough time to come online by a 2028 benchmark, as well as some new additional modeling tools, and we can sort of explore moving from the current ASAP framework into something more like WHAM or stock synthesis, as well as kind of reevaluating the stock structure concept. So there's a number of improvements that can be made, and a benchmark would be beneficial. And so we recommend actually formally scheduling one of those for Tautog for 2028 after the next assessment update. So I'm happy to take any questions on that, but that's kind of the recommendation from the TC to make that change for our stock assessment schedule.
Okay, thanks for that. Thanks for that, Katie. Let's see if anyone has any questions, and then I'll look for support of the recommendation on delaying the assessment a year. John Clark.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Katie, I was just curious as to whether we're going to be looking into the effect on catchability of the prevalence of spot lock now that recreational fishermen can use to hold themselves right over good tautog fishing areas. It seems to really have increased the number of tog that recreational fishermen catch.
We can definitely look into that. It's not something we've discussed, and I think it would probably be, we'd have to do some additional work on trying to link what we see in the MRIP intercept data with, things like who is using what and who is not, and things like that. But it's definitely something we can look into as a potential, change in catchability over time for what is an important index for us.
All right, thanks, Katie. Jason.
Yep, thanks, Katie, and completely support what you guys are trying to do, and just to offer additional support for investigating platforms that have more integration for the the spatial aspects. I think is super important and needs some time, so that's all good. I wondered if there's an ability. I'm a little nervous. It's like a little ways off. Is there like a chance somewhere between now and then to kind of just investigate indices, or I don't know, just see if there's any, maybe you guys have done this, like are there any negative signals out there? I think harvest has been fairly steady per what we saw. So I just would love for somebody to look at something and say, no, things seem normal between now and then.
So you mean between now and 2025, essentially. So I think we did look at harvest as part of, or removals as part of this, and recreational catch has gone up a little bit in all regions compared to where it was in 2020. And before that, 2020, obviously a weird year. So it's gone up a little bit. I think we haven't looked at the indices, but we could definitely maybe do some kind of traffic light approach or something. Not a formal traffic light approach, no, but like in the sense of where we pull the indices together and take a look at them sometime in the next year to kind of see if there's any strong signal there. If the board is interested in checking in on that beforehand.
Yeah, it sounds like Jason wants a little fuzzy little blanket to kind of tell him everything's okay, just hold on to it. Yeah, okay. Any other questions for Katie? Okay, seeing none, thank you for your report. Well, let me ask, I'll just make sure to put it on the record. Is there any objection to moving forward with the recommendation for the delay of the assessment? Okay, seeing no objection around the table, we'll consider that an approval. Okay, thank you very much. All right, we are getting close to the end here this afternoon. The next item on the agenda is a review and populate the advisory panel membership. Tina Berger is going to provide us with a presentation.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I present to you for your approval, Nicholas Marchetti, a commercial rod and reel and fisherman and trapper from New York. You received the nomination in your main meeting materials.
Okay. Do we have anyone that would like to make a motion to populate that seat on the advisory panel? Jesse Ornstein.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move to approve Nicholas Marchetti to the New York to the Tautog Advisory Panel.
Thank you very much for that, Jesse. Second by Jason McNamee. Get a good Italian on the panel there. Good stuff. All right. Any objection to the motion? Okay, seeing no objection. Congratulations, Nicholas, if you're listening. You are now a member of the advisory panel. The last item on today's agenda is the election of a vice chair. Does anyone have any motions they'd like to make regarding the election of a vice chair? John Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I hope it doesn't come as a surprise, but it is my pleasure to nominate our esteemed colleague from Connecticut, Dr. Justin Davis, to be the vice chair.
Okay, is there a second? Rhea Kane seconds the motion. No discussion on the motion. No objection to the motion. I didn't see that, Justin. Okay, motion carries by consent. So I think the way that will work, Justin, we spoke of it last night. I will serve as chair through the annual meeting, and then you will take over. So try not to leave it too messy for you, since we have only met once in 2 years. So I think I did okay. Okay, that concludes our business on the agenda today. Is there any other business to come before the Tautog Management Board this afternoon? Okay, seeing no hands. Thank you for your time and participation today. Thanks, Craig, Kurt, James, and Dr. Drew for your presentations. This meeting stands adjourned. Thank you.